She rolled up to our 10th anniversary dinner in a Porsche she couldn't actually afford, sat down next to my wife, and told the table she'd never felt more secure in her life. I smiled, ordered another glass of wine, and said nothing, because I already knew, deep down, that this wasn't going to end quietly. 2 years later, I'd be the one explaining to a state tax auditor exactly why that sentence had been a lie from the very first syllable. To understand how we got there, you need to know that my ex-wife, Dana, and I had built something that actually worked for 8 years. An open, honest marriage, the kind people assume falls apart the second a third person walks in. It didn't fall apart because we were poly. It fell apart because of one very specific person who was never honest about what she wanted. I'm Callum. I work as a marine surveyor in San Diego. I inspect boats and yachts for insurance underwriters and lenders before they'll finance or cover them. My entire job is looking at something shiny and figuring out whether the money behind it is actually real. I just never thought I'd need to use that skill on someone sitting at my own dinner table. Her name was Priya. She showed up at a sailing club mixer 18 months into knowing Dana professionally, claiming to run her own naval architecture firm, and within 3 months she was folded into our relationship. Carefully, gradually, in a way that looked like patience but was actually strategy. The first thing that should have told me something was wrong was small. Priya always insisted on paying for group dinners with a black card, then would quietly ask Dana to spot her for the tip because her account was doing a transfer thing. That happened 4 times in 2 months. Each time Dana waved it off. Each time I noticed. The second thing was bigger. Priya drove a brand new Porsche Taycan, a car that runs well over 6 figures, but her Instagram was full of posts about her firm finally landing its first major contract after 11 years in business. 11 years, and her first major contract was landing right when she needed to look flush in front of my wife. I mentioned it to Dana once, carefully. Doesn't it seem weird that someone driving that car can't cover a $40 bar tab? Dana's face changed instantly. Are you seriously questioning her right now? She works incredibly hard, Cal. Not everyone flaunts their money the way you'd expect. I dropped it. I know how that sounds now, like I saw it and just let it happen. But when you're in a relationship built on trust, calling out your partner's partner feels like sabotage, not vigilance. So I stayed quiet, and quiet turned out to be exactly the space Priya needed. Over the following year, Priya slowly restructured how Dana spent her time. Date nights that used to include all 3 of us became girls' trips that didn't. Conversations that used to happen at our kitchen table started happening in group chats I wasn't added to. When I brought it up, Priya had an answer ready every single time. Smooth, reasonable, always framed as me being controlling for a relationship structure I'd supposedly agreed to. This is what poly is supposed to look like. Callum, she told me once, refilling her wine at our own dinner table. Autonomy, maybe you're just not built for it. That line stuck with me for a long time. Not because it hurt, because Dana didn't correct her, and I remember thinking, whose side is she actually on here? The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March, over something almost embarrassingly small. I found a folded receipt in the laundry, a payment for a storage unit, 40 minutes outside the city, paid for in cash. When I asked Dana about it, she said it was Priya's business inventory, nothing unusual. Since when does a naval architecture firm need a storage unit off the 8 freeway? I asked. Dana's jaw tightened. Since when do you go through my laundry looking for reasons to be suspicious of her? I wasn't looking for anything. It fell out of your jacket pocket. Well, maybe stop picking up my jacket. I remember standing in that kitchen, receipt in hand, watching my wife defend a woman's finances, more fiercely than she ever defended mine, and thinking, for the first time with total clarity, that whatever Priya had built here wasn't a relationship, it was a position she was defending. 3 weeks later, Dana asked for a divorce. She said she and Priya wanted to build something real, without the complication of a third relationship in the way. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because the words without the complication were doing so much quiet, dishonest work. I signed the papers, I moved out, and for a while I genuinely believed that was the end of it. It wasn't even close. Then, 11 months later, I met Renata. Renata worked in executive recruiting for financial services firms, the kind of job where she spent her days reading corporate filings, verifying business claims, and figuring out within minutes whether someone's resume matched their actual financial footprint. She had a talent for spotting a lie in a balance sheet the way I could spot rot in a hall before it ever showed on the surface. I had no idea yet that talent was about to get pointed straight at Priya. 6 months into dating her, over dinner I mentioned Priya almost as a joke. The Porsche, the storage unit, the 11 years and still no real contract story. I expected Renata to laugh it off. She didn't laugh, she put down her fork. Wait, she's self-employed. And she's been driving a 6-figure car for how long? At least 2 years as far as I know. And she claimed her business finally got its first big client, recently? That's what Dana told me, yeah. Renata was quiet for a moment. The specific kind of quiet I'd later learn meant she was already 3 steps ahead of the conversation. Cal, she said slowly, I need you to tell me everything you actually know about this woman's business. Not what she said at dinner parties, what you know. I didn't understand yet why that question mattered so much. I only knew, watching her face, that I just handed her something she wasn't going to let go of. Everything I actually know, I repeated, which, now that I think about it, isn't much. She talks a big game. I've never seen a client contract, never seen an invoice, never even seen the inside of her office. Does she have an office? She says she works out of a studio. I don't know where. Renata nodded slowly. The way she did when she was filing something away instead of reacting to it, she didn't bring it up again that night. I didn't think much of it until 3 weeks later, when she sat me down at her kitchen table with her laptop open and said, I wasn't trying to dig, I promise. But once I started looking at public filings, I couldn't stop. Here's the thing about Renata's job that I didn't fully understand until that night. When a financial firm hires someone, they don't just check a resume, they verify it. Business registrations, licensing boards, filed addresses, entity status. It's public record if you know where to look, and Renata knew exactly where to look. Her business entity, Renata said, turning the screen toward me, has been listed as delinquent with the state for 14 months. I stared at it. Delinquent how? She hasn't filed her statement of information. She hasn't paid her franchise tax. As of right now, on paper, her company barely exists. I felt something cold settle in my chest, not triumph yet, just the first real confirmation that I hadn't been paranoid. So the Porsche is either financed against something that isn't actually generating income, or it's not really hers to lose yet. Either way, someone's about to find out. I want to be honest, my first instinct wasn't relief. It was worry for Dana. Whatever Priya had built, my ex-wife was standing directly inside it. Renata found the detail that mattered most almost as an afterthought. Priya's business address, listed on every filing for the past 3 years, wasn't a studio at all. It was Dana's house, the same house Dana had moved into 8 months ago, believing it was finally just the two of them. She's running her business out of your ex-wife's home, Renata said, and writing off expenses against a property she doesn't legally own. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Renata closed the laptop gently. Cal, I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually think about it before you answer. Do you want me to just tell you what I found, walk away, and let this play out on its own? Or do you want me to make one phone call? I thought about the storage unit, the borrowed tip money, the way Priya had once told me I wasn't built for the relationship she'd invented. And I thought about Dana, still standing inside a house that was, on paper, funding someone else's collapse. Make the call, I said. Renata didn't call the tax board that week to hurt Priya. She called because tying an unpaid business entity to someone else's residential property without their knowledge is exactly the kind of red flag the franchise tax board exists to catch. She made an anonymous tip, then she told me the same thing she told me every time this came up. Whatever happens next isn't us doing something to her, it's just someone finally checking the math. For 2 months, nothing visible happened. I almost forgot about it. Then, in June, Dana called me for the first time in almost a year. Did you do something? She asked. No hello, no small talk. Do what? Priya's getting audited. Some state agency flagged her business. They're saying the address doesn't match, that she's been claiming deductions on a property that isn't hers. Dana's voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. Not anger at me, something closer to fear. She says it's a mistake. A clerical thing. Is it? Dana didn't answer that. 2 weeks later, the franchise tax board suspended Priya's business entity outright, non-compliance with filing requirements, unpaid franchise tax accumulated over more than a year, now due in full with penalties. A suspended entity in California can't legally operate, can't defend itself in court, can't even enforce its own contracts. Whatever clients she'd claimed to have, she now had no legal standing to bill. And because she'd tied that same entity to Dana's home address for 3 years of write-offs, the state placed a lien directly on the property. The house Priya had been living in, the house she didn't legally own. I heard about the actual confrontation secondhand, from Dana, weeks later, in pieces she probably regretted sharing. Priya had tried to explain it away first. It's a paperwork issue. I'll get it fixed. This happens to small businesses all the time. Then, when the lien notice arrived with Dana's name on the mailing address, Dana asked the only question that mattered. Why is your failing business tied to my house? Priya's answer, according to Dana, was that she'd needed a stable address to look legitimate to investors, and that she'd been meaning to switch it over once things picked up. 2 years. She'd been meaning to fix it for 2 years. You put a lien on my house, Dana said, for a business that hasn't made real money since I met you. I was going to tell you when the timing was better, Priya said. She didn't deny any of it. There is never a better time to tell someone you've quietly put their home at risk to maintain an illusion. The Porsche went next. With the entity suspended and no income to service the loan, the bank repossessed it inside of 3 weeks. Dana told me she watched it happen from the front window. A tow truck backing into the driveway on a Tuesday morning, taking the one object that had convinced her for 2 years that Priya was exactly who she claimed to be. Dana packed 2 suitcases that same week and moved back in with her sister. I keep asking myself how I missed it, she told me, the one time we actually talked about all of it directly. The car, the tip money, all of it was right there. You didn't miss it, I said. You just didn't want it to be true. There's a difference. I didn't say I told you so. I'd thought about it. I decided it wasn't the moment, and honestly, watching Dana realize it on her own meant more than me saying it ever would have. Priya still owes the state of California back taxes, penalties, and interest that grow every quarter. Her entity remains suspended. Last I heard, she'd taken a job doing subcontract drafting work for a boatyard 2 hours north, the kind of job someone with a real naval architecture license takes when the firm they claimed to run never actually existed the way they said it did. Renata and I got engaged this spring. When I told her I wanted to propose, her first response, half joking, was, "Should I run a background check first, for old time's sake?" I told her she already had. That was kind of the point. A boat can look flawless on the surface and still be taking on water where nobody's checking. That's the whole reason my job exists. You don't trust the shine, you check the hull. I spent 2 years admiring a life I never once asked to see the paperwork for. I won't make that mistake again, in any direction. So here's what I keep coming back to. How many relationships are we all protecting right now, simply because we're afraid of what we'll find if we actually look closely? If you've ever caught yourself avoiding the one question that would have told you everything, I'd genuinely like to hear how you finally asked it.